Good afternoon, good morning, based upon where you're located. I am Stuart Blumenthal with ETHOSystems, and today what we're going to be going over is Sage Intacct collaboration. We got a good group here today, and hopefully we'll get some good questions along the way. And we're going to talk about Sage Intacct collaboration, which is a really cool tool, and everyone on this call who has Sage Intacct has that module for free. So what's nice is that this is something you don't have to pay for. The setup is extremely easy on it, and it's something you should all be using today. So with that, let me get started here. Couple quick housekeeping items. First of all, this presentation is going to be about 20 to 30 minutes. It's going to be a pretty short one today, so a lot of time for questions and answers afterwards or throughout the presentation. All the phone lines are muted today. Sorry about that. If anyone has any questions, please use the questions feature within the GoToWebinar feature, and that's in the little webinar panel there, and we'll be monitoring that throughout the process. Also, if you want to copy the presentation when you're done, please just put your email address into the Q&A area down below, and we'll be happy to send you a copy of the PowerPoint for today. Before we get into talking about Collaborate, just a couple small little housekeeping items regarding upcoming stuff. First of all, the 2022 R1 release is coming out in February 18th. It's got some committed cost changes in the construction area. There's a lot of other changes made to the product, and so again, that's coming out February 18th. So mark your calendars for that evening. And then the Sage Intacct, we're going to have a Sage Intacct interactive custom report writer. That is one of the reporting tools from Sage that in the construction edition that you either have to have the full version or the runtime version. And we're going to be doing a free tips and tricks webinar or training on that on February 10th. That one is actually going to be done by Adrian, who is one of our little gurus or one of our gurus on this module, and we're excited to have her do that presentation on the 10th of February. So mark your calendars and please register for that one. So without further ado, so what is Intacct Collaboration? Well, it basically is a free, internal, free runtime communication and documentation tool built within Sage Intacct. So if you have it turned on, at the bottom of a lot of screens, you'll see this little area here where you can say post, file, or link at the bottom of a lot of the screens. Most of the screens have it, like the setup screens don't. But some of these, like when you're setting up a user, or you're entering a bill, or you're entering a purchase order, or GL account, or any of that stuff, that information is at the bottom of the screens. And so it's meant to document, but also ask what's going on that. So you could ask questions, you can attach a file for supporting purposes, things like that. So again, it allows you to tag colleagues, which we'll talk about in a second there. So if they have questions on why something was entered a specific way, you're able to do that. And the goal is to really eliminate emails and conversations. They get lost from the original transaction. In today's world, email comes and goes. And this is a great way of preventing you from having to go out and take that email and then lose the supporting documents. Because think about it, if someone leaves your organization, you might if someone leaves your organization, you might not get their email after they leave, or it gets lost, or it gets deleted. And so having that supporting detail attached to the record instead of the email is more important. And again, it also allows you to, if someone talks to you about the transaction, this is a good way of documenting it within the system. And again, it's available for all Sage Intacct users, so you don't have to. So you can be an employee user, a project management user, or a business user, and you can use the collaborate features within the system. So there's two parts of setting up collaboration, and we're going to go through this in the demo process, but just to make sure everyone is set there. The first thing is that you have to set up Intacct Collaborate. So what you would do is go to the subscriptions area under the company and click on Intacct, and then within the subscriptions, click on Intacct Collaborate Setup. If for some reason that is not in there, I'm not sure if it's not in there, that means that you were not subscribed to it. So all you have to do is call your business partner or Sage and say, hey, please subscribe me to Collaborate. And it takes about 24 to 48 hours. And then at that point, you should be able to turn it on. Now you'll see something here once you go into the setup options. It says, are you going to use Intacct only, or are you going to extend the chatter from Salesforce? So Collaborate was actually built on the backbone of Salesforce. And again, for those who use Salesforce, you know how powerful that is. So what they're doing is leveraging the Salesforce chatter feature with inside of Sage Intacct. But if you are using Salesforce, you might want to extend that out. So that's a really important feature during the setup choice at that point. And then you have the contact, the company name and address. You'll see that I just have our sample data down there. Once that is done, the second step is to have each user go into their user preferences. Now, some people go, I didn't even know there's user preferences in there. It's okay. But when you go into user preferences within the menu, and I'll show you that in a moment, what you'll do is you'll scroll all the way down to the very bottom, and there's a Collaborate profile there. And there's some questions. The first thing is your picture. It's like social media. So you're going to put a picture there of yourself, and then you're going to say, what do you want to receive emails for? We do recommend, so this is tip number one, we do recommend that you check off all those boxes. That way, if you want the emails, great. Some people will just look for the little notification feature that's in the system, and that's the other option. But I like getting the emails just to make sure I don't lose it and make sure I don't accidentally not respond to something that someone's asked me to respond to. And then you could also belong to certain groups. So if there's email activity on a certain group, I want to get notification on that as well. So what are some examples of Collaborate? I started mentioning these earlier, but I wanted to give you like 3 real life examples. So collections. So we use Intacct Collaborate internally. It's again, a great tool. So if we have questions on an invoice or payment internally, if I'm looking at an aging report and I say, hey, why hasn't this customer paid this invoice? Instead of sending an email, downloading that invoice as a PDF or referencing it somehow, I will simply just go into the Collaborate and type in a message saying, to the person, I put the little @ sign, and it brings up a drop-down list of who they of the people in my organization, and I can ask them about why this invoice has not been paid, for example. So very simple there. Or what is the status of payment? So you can use it for collections. Also, you can use it for document changes of, like, for example, if I set up a new user or I assigning someone to a different security group. If I make a change now, yes, I can see that from the audit logs, but it's not going to give the rationale. It's not going to give me the reason behind that. So again, I can document why I made the change to the system, not just by using the audit features within the system, by going one step further. And last but not least, you can use it for communication. So for example, notify someone when you posted something, or ask why it's been posted, as I mentioned. So those are different examples of how we've seen people use it within our organization as well as our clients' organizations. And again, we talked about this tagging. So what you do is you put the little @ sign, and just like you would do with Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter, it brings that feature within Sage Intacct to collaborate and communicate together. So once you have set it up, it doesn't take very long to set up at all. As you can see, just basically enabling the module and then setting up the user profiles. What you will see is at the bottom of the screens, you can make a mention. Again, I'll show that in a moment. But then in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, what you'll get is that you'll see your little name. And before, you might see this help and support. Now, again, if you see this little message window. It looks like what's probably on most of our iPhones or Android devices. When you see that you'll see this little message there. Most people are like, okay, I ignored it for so long. Well, when you start getting messages, you'll see that I had one message here. And what that means is that someone wrote me, and what I did in my example is I wrote a message to myself saying, what's the status of this payment? And you can send that information at that point there. And as I mentioned to before, you will also receive a message. You will receive an email regarding that. But more importantly, you'll get that little message in the upper right-hand corner. So don't ignore that. It's actually a very valuable thing. One of the other things you're able to do is that you are able to click on the collaboration center. A lot of people don't realize that it exists. So they'll see this little list down here, and you can click on each one of those, but you can also say view all in the collaboration center. And what that will allow me to do is say, show me what I followed, messages specifically to me and then to the entire company. You can also look at people and group and look at files and stuff like that. So again, a very collaborative way where all the messages are stored in one specific area. One of our last tips before we get into the actual demo of the product is that we always recommend make this part of your dashboard. So for example, what you do is in the dashboard, and if you took our dashboard training that was, I think, held a month or two ago, you'll see that we talked about modifying the dashboards. But one of the cool things you can do with the dashboards, if you click on the little plus sign that adds a component property, you choose collaboration feed. And what I recommend is following what I follow. And what's nice is that when on your dashboard, you'll see anything, any type of thread or collaboration feed right on your dashboard. So you don't actually have to click then on the message in the upper right hand corner. You could also see see it within your dashboard at that point. Before I go into the actual demo, any questions come in here? Let me review this real quick. The only question is there an implementation cost to this? So it's actually should take, again, if you follow today's instructions, you can actually do this yourself. It doesn't really require us to even set it up for you. If you have questions, let us know, but it's really not something you're going to have. It's not an involved process of setting this up. It's more turning it on and then figuring out making sure that people are using that within the organization. That's probably the most important aspect of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my Intacct at this point here and make sure that everyone can see that. Yep, my co-presenter is saying, yep, I can see it. So where I'm in right now is that I've logged in. You'll see that I have my little one up here, that I have one message in there. But what we're going to start off with first is, again, just take you through the steps I went through. So if you go to company and you go to subscriptions here, this is where you're going to come down here. You're going to scroll down to Intacct Collaborate and click on that configure button here. If that's not there or the whole thing's missing, just let your partner know. And there's that screen that we went through before. The second thing that I said is make sure that you go through the user, so go to user preferences. So if you ever click on your little name in the upper right-hand corner here and go to my preferences. Now, some people are like, oh, I didn't even know this exists at this point here. So down here, you could say, for example, what's your favorite? It tells you your password. This is your security preferences. This is how you increase or decrease your timeouts. So if you want to increase or decrease your timeouts, you can. Notice that the 6 hours and 12 are the longest that you're able to put that as there. This is also where you can change your password. You can link your Sage Intacct Learning Center account here. You can start talking about email notifications. You can also talk about what you want to personalize and what your home screen is going to be. So importantly, if you ever change your if you want to have a specific dashboard for you versus someone else, this is where you would set it up. You can personalize the menu options there. And then we're going to keep on going, your check preferences, your date preferences for those who want maybe the date to appear in a different format. And then last but not least, that collaboration feature down here at the very, very bottom there. So that's where you're going to set up all of your personal preferences for Collaborate there. So let's give a kind of a test drive here. So if I come into, let's go this into like a real life example here. So I'm going to go into my reports here, my aging report, and I'm just going to view my aging report at this point here. And I'm going to take a look here, and all of a sudden I'm looking at this invoice here for Paula Thomas. You know, this one is 38, 47 dropped all the way down to 35, or even this one here, Tom Jones, the number was double that month here. And so I'm a little concerned by that invoice. Obviously, my system is demo system, and they haven't paid me in a long time. I'm probably going to be out of business shortly. But if I go to this invoice here, I'm going to drill down into that invoice. Apologize, it takes a second there, and I am going to expand out the screen since everyone can see this really well. And what I'm going to do is at this point here, I can scroll down to the very bottom here, and you'll notice that I could choose a file here. We do have a 2 gig limit of that file attachment, and this will not, I'm going to repeat the word not, take up your storage space within Sage Intacct, so you're not going to worry about that. I could also put a link to something down here as well, like a website or something regarding that. But what I'm going to do at this point here is I'm going to click on the post at this point here, and what I'm able to do is that I can find out, start looking at this. So it looks like it went to residential, customer was Tom. I don't have an employee associated to this, but if I wanted to, I could email my sales or go for the rep or something like that. So at this point here, I'm going to put an at, and if I start putting the name, I'm going to put this to myself. Obviously, if I wanted to put this to someone else, like Adrienne, for example, and she had her picture there, that would show up in the list. Or, sorry, I don't know why that one didn't show up. Carol, but anyone in my list will start showing up at that point. So you do need to start typing in the first characters of their name. So what I'm going to do is send this to myself at this point here. I'm going to choose Stuart. Again, that's why I would love having the picture there. I hate my picture personally, but I like to have the picture there so we can see that. And say, okay, why was this posted? Or actually, let's do this. Why was the amount twice as much this month than the prior month? I could share that. Now, this is something that if I wanted to, if I was just simply reviewing this, I can also come in and say, hey, I want to follow this information here. And what this allows me to do is that if there's something that, I wanted to follow a conversation, I might not be part of it, but I want to follow what's going on, I can also do that. So I might not be contributing, but I want to see what's going on regarding that. So this takes, once you post these messages, this takes a few minutes for it to update within the Collaborate feature. It updated there, but a lot of times this little update, the dashboard will not refresh right away. It sometimes takes a moment. So I hit the refresh at this point to force it to go faster, and you'll see that I have a message saying, why was this amount twice this month as the prior month? So I can come in here at this point here, click on this, and it will take me right into the source transaction at this point here. So this would also have come from my email. If I had that in my email, I can come to the source transaction and I can comment on this. And now it says, there was a change order regarding change order that caused this. And I could actually comment this, and I could attach a file at this point here. So if I had supporting document or something like that, I can put that in there, and I'm going to hit the enter button and hit the comment. And as soon as I do that, this will now keep that thread at this point here. Now, because I'm the actual person who created this, I can edit this post or I can delete this post. Since I created it, I could not delete someone else's at that point. I could also at this point come here and for example, I can notice that I asked, for example, I did some other stuff where I set up a user, and again, I can start seeing all the other things that I've done or are responded to me at this point here. As mentioned, I can click on the View All in the Collaboration feature. So by clicking on the View Collaborate feature here, this brings me into this little secret area where I can see what I follow, which ones were to me. Now, obviously, this one was the one that I sent it to me, and that was responses. So I can keep a list of all these at this point here within this little area. What I love is what I follow, and again, by being mentioned in there, it will be added to this at that point. So very easy to keep this information in one area. Last but not least, just kind of go over some other examples here. Again, we talked about the invoices, but again, if I was in a module, like for example, as I mentioned, like users, if I wanted to, sorry, I'm at the top entity level, hence why I'm only seeing myself here. If I go back to the top level and I go back to my company and to my users at this point here, and I went to, for example, if I made a change to Adrian, for example, I could come in here and say, for example, as I mentioned here, I said, hey, I granted this employee temporary admin rights. So I can see that I did it, but also I can say it's temporary. I can put in information of why I did that at that point. You can also, by the way, if you do not want a user and collaborate, sometimes people say, I don't want a specific user. You can fix that by going into the user and clicking disable collaborate. Again, if you won't see that unless that's been enabled, collaborate's been enabled within your system at that point. The other thing, the last thing which you can always do within here is that you can also just send general messages here too. So you can't always just come in here and say, for example, I think Dennis is in my system, or I'll just do Sue since I know she's in here. But I can say, Sue, I'm done for the day. I posted my time, things like that. So if you also don't have to tie it to a transaction as well. This can also be in a replacement for like a Slack or a Monday, or just type of even a Teams meeting at that point, a Teams message at that point where you're doing within the accounting system. So again, hey, my time has been entered for the week. Please feel free to review. So again, I can set up a general message at that point, and I can just say share at this point. I'm just gonna, and so at this point here, she'll get a message saying, "Hey, the time's been entered in," and it works perfectly at that point. So that's how Sage Intacct Collaborate works together. Again, use it for documentation purposes. That's really the overall goal behind it. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint here, checking the board for any questions here. As the question is, is it all data entry screens? And the answer is yes. So it's primarily on the data entry screens. It's not going to be on the setup screens. One of the thing that we have seen is that, like, for example, if you enter it for a comment regarding the purchase order, and then that purchase order is converted to an invoice, the comments do not flow from one to another transaction. So it does, if you do tie it to a transaction, it does not flow. So if it's a purchase order that's converted to an invoice, that does not, the comments that were on the purchase order will not carry over to the invoice. Just FYI regarding that. So good question regarding there. That allowed me to add a little bit of additional stuff. If there's any other questions, please feel free to ask them at this point here. So with that, I just want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. If you do have any questions, I'll stay on for a little bit. Otherwise, again, make this your New Year's resolution. Get your 1099s done, which, by the way, we just did a class on that. But get your 1099s done and set this up. It's really easy to use, and it's one of the really cool modules that Sage has added. And I will tell you that outside of Ethos, it's amazing how many people are not using this. So appreciate your time today, and I will talk to you later. Have a great day.